heart of Glasgow lies Glasgow Green, bordered by the River Clyde. Every Glaswegian knows the Doge's Palace and the People's Palace Museum. Nearby is a large house, less well known, but very much part of Glasgow's heritage. This is the home of the Glasgow Humane Society, founded in 1790 for the purpose of rescue of drowning persons and the recovery of bodies from the Clyde. The money to start the society was donated by James Coulter, a Glasgow merchant. Other societies were set up in New York, Paris, Milan and London around the same time to give out medals, certificates and money to anyone who assisted in the rescue of drowning people. Glasgow Humane Society is unique because it is the only working society in existence. The present house dates from 1937 and stands further back from the river than the original house, although the boat houses still occupy this site first used in 1796. In the early years of the society, ferrymen such as John Maclean, Duncan Downey and James and John Geddes received money for rescue and recovery work. As the city expanded, there was a great increase in the number of drowning accidents and suicides. The society promoted the idea of public swimming baths to cut down bathing fatalities and also appointed George Geddes as full-time officer in 1859. In 1889, George Geddes' son, also called George, succeeded his father and he was officer until 1932. His son, the third George Geddes, may have become the next officer, but unfortunately drowned in 1928 while attempting to save a man who jumped off the St Andrews suspension bridge. The next officer was Ben Parsonage, father of the present officer George Parsonage. As a schoolboy, Ben Parsonage had spent all his spare time helping George Geddes. As a young man, he became a champion oarsman, as well as assisting the society. Ben Parsonage, aided by his wife Sarah, was the society's longest-serving officer. From 1928 until his death in 1979, a period of 51 years. In his lifetime, Ben became a legend. There are countless stories about his famous rescues and recoveries. It has been estimated that he was responsible for saving at least 1,000 lives, preventing thousands of accidents, and recovering at least 1,000 bodies from the Clyde and surrounding waters, as well as stolen property and weapons. Ben would sometimes spend weeks searching for a body. He once crept and swam for 40 minutes along a dark culvert to recover the body of a 10-year-old boy drowned in Jenny's Burn. The boy's father had waited for 10 days. These newspaper cuttings relate to only a part of the work of Ben Parsonage over his 51 years as Humane Society officer. The present house is a virtual shrine to the achievements of the Parsonage family. 1930 Anchor Line Bravery Award to Ben Parsonage, 1936 Glasgow Corporation Bravery Medal, 1953 Bar to the Glasgow Bravery Medal, 1955 Second Bar to the Glasgow Bravery Medal, 1971 British Empire Medal awarded to Ben Parsonage, 1971 George Parsonage awarded the Glasgow Corporation Bravery Medal, 1971 Honorary Testimonial of the Royal Humane Society, 1978 Mountbatten Medal of the Royal Life Saving Society, 1983 Honorary Testimonial of the Royal Humane Society for the second time, 1986 the Chief Constable's Commendation awarded to Sarah Parsonage, wife of Ben. Today the family tradition is carried on by George and his sister Anne. Their parents are remembered. It is the 28th of March 1989 and people are gathering for the launch of the Ben Parsonage Memorial Rescue Boat. The Sarah Parsonage Memorial Rescue Boat is already in use. The Provost of Glasgow, Deputy Chief Constable, Assistant Chief Constable and Mr. Robert Breachin of the Humane Society are on the wharf.
And further engagements today, forgetting the ones you had this morning. So perhaps I can just ask you to take whatever action is necessary to hand over the boat. I don't know how one hands over a boat.
Clyde Water's the best. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I've actually been involved with the Parks and Recreation Charities Club over many years, and I know, Ben, that this is on 2 occasions, is it, that
This is the third boat.
the third boat this well. Hopefully that your work's not going to be twice or even 3 times as hard, but at least you've got it there, and I think it's a great thank you to the charity group. They've done a great job and always are doing about Glasgow. So can I christen it? Has it got any?
The Ben Parsonage Memorial.
The Ben Parsonage Memorial Rescue Boat.
George and Anne are well known to those who use the river and the green in the course of their work, such as the police and parks and recreation staff. George would be unable to carry out his duties as Humane Society officer without his sister Anne, who is herself an expert oarswoman. Anne is usually in the house to take calls when George is involved in a rescue or recovery. She has assisted in many rescues. Anne also keeps a watchful eye on the river at this busy side of the public park. George is a champion oarsman and has won many medals in Scottish and British vests. His advice is often sought by rowers who use the Clyde, and many have reason to thank him for pulling them out of the water after a mishap, such as these students. Many people drop by for a chat and exchange of information about the river, such as this local fishing enthusiast who has asked George to make a set of sturdy oars.
Seemed to be some big competition. There was between 40 to 100 fishermen. Some arrived on the river, and at least 50% of them were wearing thigh waders, you know, on the river. You know, no buoyancy aids or anything. And I saw half a dozen of them wading up to their waist in the water. And you know, if they get out a couple of feet with a straight down, this is it. That's right. And they're using these big long rods, you know, the long poles, and the thing is, for buying the other dangers, they're making the river so narrow for the racing boats.
The boat sheds contain tools and equipment for the maintenance and repair of boats, as well as equipment for rescue and recovery.
It's the type of grappling iron that we use for recovering bodies today. It's got two ropes on it. It's got the one that we drag along the bottom of the river with, and it's got a wee tripping line here which we can, if we snag onto anything, we snag onto anything in the bottom, we can pull it back and lift it and free it. It's a trick that's used by fishermen if they're anchoring their boats or anything. This long drag with the 4 prongs is the one that we find most effective over the years. There have been various types of grappling irons used. There's very short ones with 3 prongs. There's this type, 3 or 4 pronged, but we don't find any of them as good as the long barbed 4-prong one we use today. Last century, this type was used as what we call a bar drag, with 3 ropes, one in the middle and one at either end, and this was supposed to cover a bigger area, which it did, but you don't have the same feel on it, you don't have the same control over it, and although it might have been quicker, I don't think it is effective and as accurate as the one we use at present.
So these grappling irons, George, you actually use those for searching for bodies, for lifting
bodies?
So
if someone has actually drowned, we use it. The search is done by grappling iron, and it's very, very effective. As I say,
and it doesn't actually damage the body.
It never leaves a mark on the body, even if there's no clothes on the body or that. Never, as I've said, it's like lifting a balloon with a pin. You know, if you can actually put a sharp pin below the balloon, and if you catch it very gently, you can actually lift it without bursting the balloon. It's the same kind of effect, a body, and you just bring it very gently to the surface. It's quite amazing just how accurate you can work. And we've also got this as a pole drag. It's the same idea is this: we use this in quarries or canals, next to a lock gate, somewhere we maybe can't get in with the boat or you can't get into search. And we've got these in telescopic poles that fit together, and they go up to maybe 20, 30 feet in length, and you work over your shoulder and you work down and work in. But as I say, that's only what you can't use. That is proven. These ones there are proven to be by far the best. You get different weights of them. If you're working in an area where it's very, very heavily silted and a lot of mud in the bottom of the river, if the body maybe is in the mud, you want a heavier drag to get down, but it's been very, very effective over the years. That.
To prevent more lives being lost on the Clyde, George regularly patrols up and down river, often in bad weather. On this occasion, we accompany him on a patrol upriver as far as Rutherglen. Vandals hinder the rescue service and endanger lives. In the past 5 years, George has recovered over 600 life belts thrown thoughtlessly into the water.
The only good point is now that 60 years ago, the type of life belt we had was very susceptible to getting broken. So when life belts get thrown in, not only were they thrown in, they were broken by the vandals.
An elderly woman has been reported missing by the police. She was last seen near the river, and George is keeping an eye open for signs.
Something that would give any sign that she's actually came near the water. If she did come near the water, did she drop her handbag? Is there a mark of a mark in the bank of somebody having fallen in, or let's say some clothing, or a head square or something lying around?
George removes items which may attract children to play on or near the river. Here, a hut built by bird watchers, which overhangs the river, is dismantled because it is a danger to children. The hut is well constructed from wooden pallets, probably dumped near the river by haulage firms. These are often made into rafts by youngsters.
Obviously there's an awful lot of children fall in that's purely unsupervised. It's the old story of knowing where your children are. I mean, how on earth you can get 2- and 3-year-olds on their own playing down at the water's edge, I don't know. I mean, that's just It just shouldn't happen. And of course, not just parents, adults are to blame for, I mean, it's adults that make things like rafts, it's adults that throw big old footballs into the water, or old chest of drawers or furniture and that children try to float on.
Oil drums are also a hazard.
Because you know, they're mucky and oily, but you've got to move them because, again, that's a perfect item for children wanting to use as a raft.
Everything seems to find its way into the Clyde. These light fittings have been removed from a local school by vandals. The society sheds are full of discarded items.
This is a very dangerous part of the river. This kind of island that we're coming up to. This is actually it's an old mine shaft. There's 45 feet of water below us here. When you consider that there's only 15 feet in some places of the harbour, that's a lot of depth. And see the bank sunk in down into the old mine shafts. I'm actually going to take a sample of the water now. What we do with this is I'm above the council sewage works, so if I'm on the river I'll take a sample for them of the water above their works, a sample at the works and a sample down at the weir, and that gives them a double check on anything they're discharging, so that if the purification board or anybody comes along and says you're putting muck into the river, they can immediately verify it or not.
Are you doing this often?
Okay, at least once a week, aye. And any time I see, if I see any discoloration, any signs of stuff on the river, I'll take a sample for it and send it up. Alright, you think you could drink it? George Maley would make tea with that. Dalmarnock Bridge. That means it's above Dalmarnock Bridge. But it's very deceptive, you know, you watch something like the whitewater canoeing and you see the water surging like, you know, big high waves and currents and everything, and it looks very, very dangerous. But in actual fact, it's flowing quite freely, whereas the likes of this looks dead calm. Looks as though there's nothing wrong with it, but it's incredibly treacherous. I can't see it. I mean, I know the old farm machinery is inches below the surface, but can't see it. And if you can't see it, it's even more a danger. You see the stumps of wood in the river ahead of you? See the wee stumps of wood in the river? They're the piles of what we called, when they had the coal mines here, that was a wooden bridge that went from the old farm colliery right across to London Road, and the pit ponies pulled the bogies up and down the bridge.
These racing boats have been broken by submerged cars which are a particular problem for rowers on the river.
Nobody bothers. It's only if it's actually reported missing and the insurance company are looking for it, the MD really takes it out. Pallet up the bank, and if it ends up in the river, you know, again that becomes more raft material. We try to stop the firms dumping stuff like that in the river banks. What I'll do is I'll phone them up, there's a firm there and I'll ask them to remove that. And not only saves me the bother, it might make them a wee bit more aware. For big lorries to fancy cars, your Jaguars and your Sabs come here and they dump all their rubbish out the boots as if they couldn't dump it anywhere. It's a pigsty.
Many things could be done to make the river a safer place, such as the removal of rubbish and the repair of broken fences.
There's no need for anybody to dump rubbish down a river bank or into a river now. Because to a youngster, they don't know that a ball's burst or a doll's getting its arm and leg ripped off. They just see something floating in the water that looks attractive to them, so they go to try and get it. I mean, it doesn't have to be a big fence, but you have to have a fence along a river bank to stop something like somebody letting a pram go and the pram running into the water and the baby getting drowned, as has happened, or a child on a wee bicycle or a tricycle or something. If there's no fence there, they can often roll down slopes and they go straight down into the water.
George has received a call to investigate something suspicious in the water at the tidal weir bridge. Because it is nearby, he uses the rowing boat and is assisted by Eric, a young rowing companion. On this occasion, nothing was found, but George is always on standby in case of emergencies. If a rescue or recovery is at a distance, the police are asked to provide a towing vehicle. The search for a body can take several weeks. George often works all through the night. His perseverance is of great value to relatives and friends of victims.
Sorry, John. It's a beam. A beam. Jacket. For everybody that goes in the river, there is one turns up. They're not always identified as the person that goes in, but they always turn up, always. It was only once a tiny wee child got washed away and no body was ever found. I mean, a body can get washed away, and I mean, you don't want to get into the morbid details, but I mean, if a body gets washed away and it gets trapped on a piece of wood and it gets covered with silt, the silt and the mud builds up on top of it. I mean, we've taken them out after 2 years in the water. That's a long time. But they belong to someone, and you know. I've recovered a body after 2 weeks of solid searching, and I must admit I was quite pleased with that one, because other people had tried to recover this and it couldn't be found, and the body was where it was seen to enter the water. It was there, and I got it after 2 weeks, and I mean, that was much better for the relatives than after 4 or 5 weeks. But when someone's in the water and washed away, even for the sake of the parents or the relatives or the wife, you know, whatever, you've got to be seen to be out every day. They expect someone to be out every day. So you do search every day. Even if you know the chances are very slim that you won't find them until they turn up, you're giving them some kind of comfort if they can see that you're out searching every day.
All rescues and recoveries are important, but some stick in the memory more than others, as George explains here.
Two people came running to my door one night and informed me that there was something suspicious looking in the river just out here. And there was a very wild, pouring rain, high winds that night, so I rushed down and I couldn't believe my eyes when I realised it was a woman floating in the river. And I went to lift her into the boat, just in the normal fashion, and I realised there was blood everywhere. And she had a very, very bad injury around about her midriff. So I had to hold her, catch her, lean over, try and bring her knees up into her chest and put my hands underneath her legs, underneath her knees, and lift her totally into the boat. A policeman had been summoned and come running down the bank by this time, and I shouted for him, what had a very bad injury, to get an ambulance as quick as we could. And I got the boat to the side of the river, and I lay with the woman, keeping her conscious, talking to her all the time, getting her to talk to me until the ambulance arrived. And when we went to put her in her stretcher, we discovered she had been actually slashed. Somebody had cut her stomach with a Stanley knife, and a lot of her intestines had fallen out, and nobody thought she would live. But we learned the next day the doctors in the Royal, by some miraculous way, had managed to put it all back together again and sewn her up. And in actual fact, she's just about the only person who keeps in touch. She sends me a Christmas card every year, which was very nice of her, you know. On the Saturday afternoon of the Scotland-England football match, I received a phone call from Force Control that a man had entered the river 140 yards west of the Albert Bridge, which we're looking at just now. A towing vehicle picked me up immediately and we rushed to the scene here, where there were hundreds, maybe thousands of people on the banks, and en route I was informed that this Scots football fan had decided that he really did hate the English football fans, and he got himself a high-powered air pistol and started to shoot at them. When the police arrived, he started to shoot at the police. Then he ran down, jumped in the river and said, you know, come on and get me. So we launched the boat and got out, and after a struggle, you know, managed to get the chap into the boat and bring him to the side of the bank where the police took him into custody.
Anne has seen many changes to the house and emergency service over the years.
This double door led into what we knew as the treatment room, where there was 2 rubber beds, one ready, made up for the patient to go into if necessary, till the ambulance, police, the services arrived to take them to hospital if necessary. There was plenty of sheets, towels, blankets all kept there, and depending whether father rescued a man or woman out the river or young children, mother would deal with the women and children, father would deal with the men, until the ambulance service arrived to take them to the hospital. We have still in use at times a stretcher, a metal stretcher, but most, over the recent years, the ambulance services, the radio communications are so quick now, the room was really no longer necessary, although all the equipment is still in the house for use.
There is always plenty routine and maintenance work to be done.
Lift someone out, what you do is you use the splice and the rope to form a loop under the shoulders, but once you've lifted the person out, to still give ease of moving around, you leave about a foot of rope, a couple of feet of rope around the shoulders that allows anybody to lift anything, and so you just cut your rope, so every time you do something like that, you have to re-splice the end of the rope. Sometimes, you know, life depends on how strong that joint is.
George warns off youngsters who stray too close to the water. On occasions, his warnings go unheeded. A group of youths were drinking at the river bank and were asked to move for their own safety by George. Later they returned to swim in the Clyde nearby with tragic results, as described by George's friend Stan, who witnessed the incident.
Yes, well, it was one Sunday, George and I were up in the garden when a person came up and raised the alarm that a boy was in the Clyde. So George rushed down, jumped into the boat, shouted to me to get a boat hook. And when I came out, George was just down here in the boat looking for the boy. An oarsman had pointed out where he was. So George dived in, and when he was down there trying to get the body out, George got entangled in the reeds. And when he came up, he was coming up, his head was still under the water. So I put the boat hook under his arms and levered him up. Then a policeman helped George get the body into the boat, and a doctor who was on hand came down and gave him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. But by that time it was too late.
George makes regular visits to the tidal weir bridge, as both he and the weirmen have an interest in the condition of the river and can exchange information.
We got this set of steps made a few years ago onto the weir so that, I mean, the gates can only be lifted to let a boat under. At high tide that only happens about twice a day, sometimes only once a day. And if the water is 4 or 5 feet low on the downside of the gates, you either have to lift the boat over the girders or to lift it round the river banking. So we got this set of steps made so that we can come along, we ease the bow of the boat or the stern of the boat up onto the gate, slide it over and down the ramp of the steps. And but as you gather, it's quite a slippy procedure, but it's a useful commodity in an emergency. I mean, you see how the structure of the gates is. We came down one day, there was a man had fallen into the river down about 100 yards downstream, and 2 men had gone in to try and get him, and the 3 of them were now hanging onto a lifebelt. The 3 of them were all shouting for help. So my father and I came down in the lifeboat, and as we approached the weir, we stepped one on either side of the boat and we stepped onto the steel girder of the weir, which is quite a thin steel girder, and we balanced on that and we swung the boat up, and we swung the boat across these girders. Then we walked across the girders, dropped the boat down into the water and jumped after the boat and went on and rescued the men that were hanging onto the lifebelt. So we now have this set of steps.
Any time we see any bodies in the Clyde, the first person I phone is George, you know, and he takes it from there. Really, as I say, I don't really like seeing bodies floating about the gates, you know. We've had a few. I had one morning at 6:15 coming off night shift, and of course when I'm home I couldn't sleep all day. The thought, you know, as a woman it was actually, you know, and that's about 3 years ago, you know.
an awful lot of folk jumping off this bridge. They come out of the nightclubs here. The nightclubs, and they come out of the nightclubs at 4 in the morning and jump in. That we launch a boat at usually. Sometimes there's 20, the water 20 feet lower, a lot lower. This is where we do most of the launching of the boats when we're coming down harbour. Anything happens in the harbour and the tide, if the tide isn't high, like we can use this speedboat, what happens is the nearest police towing vehicle comes and picks me up and brings me down and we launch here. That's too heavy for me to remove. That's a home, that's a ready built raft. There's no way I can take that away. That's part of the key wall floating. If I can do that, what are kids going to do with that?